Hey, we're glad to have you. Welcome to Bills by the Numbers, presented by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Coming up with the draft closing in, we take a whole different look at draft value and how much analytics have impacted the inexact science. Kevin Cole from Unexpected Points spells out the positions historically that offer the best value at pick 27 for the Bills. And we answer our one burning question. Hey, when are we on the clock? Happy to have you with us here on Bills by the Numbers. Bills Wall of Famer Steve Tasker, Bills insider Chris Brown with you. And with the draft closing in, we thought it would be interesting to dive into an alternative means by which to assess the value of each and every pick in the draft and where the most advantageous value might sit. First and foremost, we should mention that Kevin Cole, formerly of PFF and now doing his own thing at Unexpected Points, has spelled out a lot of this, and he will join us a bit later on in the show. But we want to start by laying out how the analytical pros now measure value in the draft. We all know the old Jimmy Johnson trade value draft chart, which attached a number value to every pick in the draft. What the analytic pros found was there was too much value placed on the high picks. What's interesting is they attribute this miscalculation to something that's much harder to measure, as I see it, overconfidence. But even though you can't measure it, it does make sense to think a GM, Steve, with a pick at the top of the draft is going to be more confident. He thinks he's picking a can't-miss player as opposed to a GM maybe at the bottom of round one.
Sure, because all those guys at the top of the draft, we've talked about this on the show, the regular daily show all the time. When you get to the top of the NFL draft, it's because of a couple of things. One, production in college at a Power 5 school, at a place where you've either dominated at a lower level or dominated at the top level against the best competition available. Second thing, you look the part. You're tall, you're fast, you're strong, you're athletic, you stand out in a crowd. You've got things that people can look at and say, wow, what sport does that guy play? Wow, what position in football does that guy play? You have a measurable. You're big, fast, strong, and athletic. When you have measurables, the confidence level of people who are picking you goes up exponentially. And at the top of the NFL draft, all of those guys always, every year, are that. They are measurable. You can take them out on a field, and they will jump higher, run faster, lift more weights, better than anybody else. That's what gives scouts and GMs confidence. Those guys, at least when they get off the bus, I'm going to look like a smart dude.
Yeah. And GMs, it's logical. If I'm picking first and I got the pick of the litter, I feel pretty darn good. I'm going to nail this.
Right.
But they don't always nail it.
Yeah.
And so you can I'm really curious to talk to Kevin about that. That's going to be my first question. How are you measuring overconfidence? I mean, I understand in the top 5 picks there are always going to be misses. I mean, as long as the Jets are up there, they usually miss. Sam Darnold, hello. Zach Wilson, hello. So, that's pick 3 and 2 in the last 6 years. So I understand the overconfidence angle. I'm just curious how they know that people in the top 5 are more overconfident than people from 10 to 15. Right. You know what I mean?
Yes,
so that's what I want. I want an answer from Kevin on.
And I'll say one of the things about this as well that I've never heard done, we'll ask him about it as well, is that now more than ever they're starting to, in today's economic NFL, you're talking about money positions. Obviously the quarterback, big-time number 1 wide receiver, a left tackle, and an edge rusher.
And a corner, maybe.
And a corner, right. The guy that guards the guy that rushes the passer, the guy that catches the passes, and the guy that guards him. Those are the kind of the money positions that you have in the NFL now. I have yet to see anybody attach value, draft value, to those positions in regards to another position.
Yeah.
Certainly we don't see first-round running backs as often as we have in decades past because the position has been devalued. But how do you quantify the importance of a position, particularly when you've got 32 teams whose value may be, or whose need, not value, need is completely different in the same draft.
Yeah.
It's a puzzle with, forget those 500-piece puzzles you used to do at Thanksgiving with the family. This is a 10,000-piece puzzle, and it's all one color on the same sheet of paper.
Yeah.
It's
Put
impossible.
together this 10,000-piece blue puzzle.
Right. It's really impossible with 1,000 different parts and values and needs by the teams, and the mixture of the variables is different every year.
What's interesting is, according to one of Kevin Cole's charts, the peak surplus value for draft picks crests from about pick 6 to pick 12, and then it slides steadily from there. People who don't know the analytics might say, well, of course the value declines the further you go down the draft board. I think the point the analytics experts are trying to make is, while surplus value may peak at like 9 in round 1, what it focuses on is how much those players exceed their value. And at the top of the draft, it's very hard for picks to do that. Not just because of the hype, but because this is the value of this pick. This is the value of players at your position that are veterans in the league that make a ton of money. Have fun living up to that.
That's right. And that's why it's fans and GMs get their reputations bolstered when they pull out a guy like a Matt Milano for the Buffalo Bills, a 5th-round draft pick who now is an all-pro.
Yeah.
At linebacker.
They don't get that for nailing the linebacker.
They get
if they
no
take
credit.
One at pick 9.
Right. They get no credit for Tre'Davious White, an all-pro corner in his second year in the league, at pick 17. 27, right? So that's it. I think when you come down to it and when push comes to shove, we say it's not an exact science. It's not science at all. It's art. It's art.
Or a crapshoot, depending on your
yes,
perspective.
In this day and age, you're standing at a window and you've got your money in your hand. You're saying, okay, I'm betting on that.
Yeah.
That's basically what you're doing. It is art and gambling more than it is science.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how Kevin came to delineate the different positions, the surplus value, because we know a lot of those premium positions that you referenced, Steve, get the most money.
Yeah.
How does that impact what their determination of surplus value is, wins above replacement, all of those things?
And how that pick is evaluated is when you picked him. If you got a guy like an Aaron Donald, he was picked in the top 10, not number 1, but top 10. A guy like J.J. Watt, same thing. He was a first rounder, but not
12th pick.
12th pick, and those guys are multiple MVP as pass rushers, a money position. Lane Johnson, a first round pick,
maybe the best right tackle in the last 20 years.
Absolutely. Those kind of players, you knew they were probably going to be good, but you've also seen players like them not be as good.
Yeah.
Well,
for every Lane Johnson, there's a Tony Mandarich.
There you go. Yeah, there is. For every J.J. Watt, there's a Kevin McCargo,
or John McCargo.
John McCargo. You just don't know. And each player has their own pluses and minuses, but they also have their own heart and their own head and their own intelligence, their own life experiences and their own commitment, whether it's there or not. That affects how productive they'll be.
Perhaps the most eye-opening figure comes in the chart that breaks down surplus value on prospects by position. And again, we'll get into this more with Kevin when he joins us. But for positions like tight end, running back, linebacker, safety, and interior O-line, the best surplus value is right around the top of round 2, not in round 1. And I think it speaks to how the non-quote-unquote premium positions offer the best value in round 2 rather than round 1. You got all these people talking about taking a running back in round 1 this year, Bijan Robinson. Look at Bijan Robinson. And he might be great. He might be an outlier. Who knows? But round 2 rather than round 1 for running back, tight end, linebacker, those positions.
And we also know this, too, where they're picked equates as well as to how much patience the organization has with them. A first-round top 5 pick needs to be plugged in and played right away. That's the axiom. But what happens if a player like a Pat Mahomes comes in? What if Pat Mahomes had been drafted and plugged in right away as the Kansas City Chiefs? Would he
instead of sitting for a year.
Instead of sitting for almost the entire year until the last game of the season.
A throwaway game.
Would he have been as successful? It's hard to believe he would not have been, particularly with that team. But what if Pat Mahomes gets drafted by a team that's struggling, like the Jacksonville Jaguars were at the time, or the Houston Texans were at the time, or another franchise with a different head coach, a different philosophy, different level of patience with that draft pick? Would he have been a multiple MVP, multiple Super Bowl participant, a champion? Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
All of that has to get thrown into the stew as well and stirred around and see how that percolates, because you'd never know. Maybe it was a specific teammate who was a mentor to get the guy through his first year.
Well, Alex Smith, yeah.
Who made a difference for him, who really instilled something in him that he never forgot and has always carried with him and to this day is always there. Alex Smith's a great example. All of these things get in there, and because you're dealing with human beings who, they're these animals that they're the only ones out there that can make a difference in their lives with one decision from this point forward. And that's why it's art, not science.
And it's a loose use of the word art, but
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. The other thing, too, you mentioned patience. You know, you have these non-premium positions. The Bills are in the market for a linebacker and probably need to draft one pretty early, knowing that after the top tier or two, there's a significant drop-off for an off-the-ball middle linebacker to replace Tremaine Edmonds. And I said on our daily show, One Bills Live, my man crush is on Drew Sanders, and I'd take him at 27 because of his athleticism, the ability to play two positions, middle linebacker and rush the passer on obvious passing downs. To me, that says there's enough value there to take him at 27. This surplus value chart says, no way, Jose, wait until round 2. My other question for Kevin is going to be, how many GMs in the league pay attention to this surplus value, or do they stick to the traditional mores of scouting and say, we scouted this guy for 10 months. I don't care if you're telling me surplus value peaks in round 2 for linebackers. This guy's good enough to take now at 27. I'm doing it.
Yeah, and the problem is this. In this linebacker class of the draft, it's different than last year's linebacker class. This has two guys that are built like middle linebackers. They're both 6'4", 6'5".
235,
Jack
240
Campbell
pounds.
And Drew Sanders. The other guys are all, and I'm saying they're not all like this, but they're built like converted safeties. Mm-hmm. They're smaller guys, and they're not going to stand up to a 330-pound guard coming out and getting up on them. They can't physically stand up to that kind of physical presence and push against them and win. Jack Campbell, Drew Sanders may be able to do that better because they're between 245 and 250. That's a difference. But that class coming out has two guys like that. Now, you're getting to the second round, you're telling me 64 picks, nobody's going to see a linebacker like that as being more valuable. And if you're picking 54 or 59 like the Bills are, that guy is gone.
Yeah.
Both of them are gone. And then the next guy is not worthy of that pick, and now what are you doing? That's an issue because your need has to, despite what they say, has to play a factor in the position you're thinking about taking at that pick.
It's not irrelevant.
It's not irrelevant. It's a horrible evaluator.
Yes.
But it is not irrelevant.
How does it impact? It'll be fascinating to see. As for those who are wondering, the cornerback, and receiver positions both peak in value just before the midway point of round 1, and other premium positions like offensive tackle, edge rusher, defensive tackle peak around 9 to 12. Pick 9 to 12 in round 1. What this means is if you're a team in the top half of round 1 and you don't like the value of one of the premium positions like quarterback, offensive tackle, edge, corner, receiver, trading out, though, it may give you more trading out, though it may give you more draft capital, it dramatically reduces your chances of getting surplus value at one of those premium positions, according to the charts laid out by Kevin Cole. To give you an idea how much, by the end of round 2, the surplus value at offensive tackle, edge, corner, and receiver dropped by more than half after round 2. That's a big drop. Like, if we're seeing this, you have to believe that NFL GMs have seen these analytics in some capacity. So do you think these figures, Steve, would influence you and your own value chart, GM Steve Tasker, that you and your personnel department has worked on for the last 10 months?
Oh, absolutely. They have to. They have to. At the top of the draft, no question, it's hard for these guys to outperform a contract. At the bottom of the draft, it seems easier, but the problem is this. The only guys that do, what kind of guys that do? To me, it's guys who have something against them to be drafted higher than that. Mm-hmm. And for some reason now they've been passed over a couple of times for some reason.
This is the chip on the shoulder effect?
A little bit of a chip on the shoulder effect. They still have measurables or production. But for some reason, an off-the-field incident, or
playing in a tiny school,
or they're not tall enough, they're not heavy enough, haven't played the position long enough.
No body of work, yeah.
Body of work, whatever reasons there are, or whatever group of reasons conspire against them, they have a chip on their shoulder, or their measurables are such that they can still do it physically. Because once you get down further and further in the draft, there's almost too many things to overcome that are tangible, like the height, the weight, the speed, the strength. You almost can't overcome those to the point where you can overvalue yourself. Like a 6th-round draft pick, if he can stay in the league, that's overperforming.
Christian Benford.
Right. If you can just stay in the league, that's...
He started week 1.
You get a Christian Benford, it's like, where did this guy come from?
From an FCS school.
But he did have measurables. He's a big corner.
Yes.
And he did play in a scheme that was conducive to giving him the skill set that he had here at Buffalo that they wanted early. That got him on the field early. Now, at the end, he was injured and that kind of thing, and that you will never know how his rookie season would have come. We'll find out maybe this year. But those kind of things are the ones that you can't anticipate, you know. But they took a chance on him in that round, later in the rounds, because he had measurables, and he played in a scheme that showed he had reps, time on task, of what he was going to be asked to do in this scheme. So the Bills, it might have been a great 6th-round pick for them. He might have gotten cut if he'd have been picked by a team like the Las Vegas Raiders, where they play man. So there you go. I mean, that's a GM that knows and has coaches in his ear as well. And we've talked about GMs a lot. The relationship between the GM and the coach is crucial in this as well. So if the coach can say, a guy like Sean McDermott can say, hey, this Benford kid, he played a ton of what we play here.
Yeah.
The transition will be easier for him. And in reality, it became easier for Christian Benford than it did for Kaiir Elam, who was off the charts physically gifted.
Right. And I think we've already seen a shift to some degree from GMs, because nowadays there are a lot fewer running backs, linebackers, tight ends taken in round 1. There are always going to be exceptions, but I think they recognize the surplus value at the premium positions, and more importantly, Steve, knowing those are the positions that get paid, you're even more apt to take a corner in round 1, because it's cost control for 5 years on a rookie deal. Even though he's going to be one of the higher paid rookies because you draft him in the first round, it's still peanuts compared to what you're paying a 5th or a 6th-year corner that's been to a couple of Pro Bowls. They're getting 18, 19 a year.
And I'll say this as well. A lot of elite athletes now are gravitating earlier and earlier in their careers towards the money positions, corner, but particularly because most people are built like most of us. They're not 6'6", 330.
Yeah.
They're between
5'10",
5'11", 5'10", and 6'2", somewhere in there. And if they have elite skills, or if they're athletes enough, they gravitate towards the money positions, corner, safety, wide receiver, and running back. The problem is, a lot of guys love to have the ball in their hands. They love to be that guy. In fact, a ton of them do, which is why positions like running back, I think at this point in history, there's a ton of really good athletic guys who can carry the ball. And that also further depresses that market for an elite running back when you've got a ton of guys who can do it really well, who are capable and are doing it cheap, over a guy who gives you just 1/10 of a degree more than that as an elite guy.
Yeah.
who does it for lots of money. That's an economic decision.
Here to help paint the picture a bit better on these draft analytics is Kevin Cole from unexpectedpoints.com, who put together this piece, What Analytical Draft Value Curves Are Missing About NFL Roster Building. Here is Kevin. All right, Kevin, so I have to start here because you guys measure just about everything under the sun, but your assessment of overconfidence on the top picks in the draft kind of fascinated me a little bit. Naturally, if you get the pick of the litter in the draft like the Carolina Panthers, you're going to feel pretty good that you're going to make the right call. Or if even if you're in the top 5, you're pretty confident you're getting a dang good player. But why do you believe they're more overconfident, and how did you kind of go about trying to measure that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, this is research that builds upon work that's been done for almost 20 years at this point, starting with Cade Massey and Richard Thaler. They wrote a piece and a paper, they're both professors, about what they called the loser's curse. So it was showing how teams at the top of the draft in some ways are in a worse position than at the bottom of the draft because they're paying so much more for rookie salaries than others are. But as part of that research, what they did is they just looked at rank ordering of players by position and the percentage chance that the player taken before the next player would actually be better. And they looked at it in a few different ways: Pro Bowls, All-Pro selections, approximate value, which is a stat that has been around for a long time, looking at player value. And it came down to about a coin flip between the two, about a 52% chance that the player drafted first in that rank ordering would be better than the next player drafted there. And what we see very often is teams, trade up in the draft in order to move up maybe 1 or 2 spots in the ranking order because of their particular fondness for one prospect. But what we find over time is generally that's an overpayment just because teams overestimate how big of a difference it is in that ranking.
Yeah, Mitchell Trubisky's probably the biggest example.
Yeah. How difficult is it when you get this? And I know players are players, but also recently we've started to talk a lot about position valuation, money positions, left tackle, wide receiver, corner, pass rusher, quarterback, of course. How does that mix in with this?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge part, and that's really what my research has been going into a lot recently is you do see some draft analysis where they're looking at the average value that you'll get across the entire spectrum, mostly of non-quarterbacks. Mostly we kind of segregate quarterbacks out because they're just a unique type of player and a value proposition there for teams. But I think that's a little bit of a mistake because there is so much more value to be gained in certain positions. I mean, the way that I looked at it, the value that you can gain drafting the positions is really just using the contracts, the second contracts that players are getting as an approximation for how much the NFL values these different players. So when we talk about left tackle, edge rusher, interior defender, like an Aaron Donald type who can really rush the passer, I mean, those positions are just earning so much more. We're talking about anywhere from 5 to 10% more of the salary cap per player, per contract is going into those types of players, that if you're drafting them at the equivalent position as maybe even a great safety or a great interior offensive lineman or a great linebacker, you're just not going to get as much value there. And those players are very hard to find. Elite level players are very hard to find outside of the first round, where you can find more often elite players at other positions later on in the draft.
Okay, so I'm going to throw a scenario at you that the Bills are very much in right now at pick 27 at the bottom of round 1. They have a gaping hole at middle linebacker after losing Tremaine Edmunds in free agency. They haven't filled it in free agency to this point, and it's looking like a draft pick is going to be made at that position somewhere. There's a consensus on 2 particular linebackers in this class, Drew Sanders from Arkansas, Jack Campbell from Iowa. Some believe they're in the top 50 prospects, but they're probably second-round draft picks. Linebacker, as we know, not a premium position. We're not talking about edge people. We're talking about middle linebackers here. Is 27 close enough to round 2 to justify it? Like, help me out, Kevin. We got a hole in the defense.
Yeah, I mean, it's close, but I think even if you look at this free agency cycle, and part of that is, losing a player at linebacker, but there are a lot of linebackers who switched teams, and the amount that they were being paid, some of them were a little bit higher cost, but some of them are pretty reasonably priced. So I think that is maybe a reason why linebacker isn't seen as being that high of a position. I mean, I divide it into three different tiers. So the top tier of non-quarterback are those positions I mentioned before. The second tier is really wide receiver and cornerback. So at the end of the first round, I think that is more of the area where you want to be looking at those positions. You get some peak values right around there. And then the third tier, linebacker is kind of at the top of that third tier, but I don't know. I think you can just wait there because so many NFL teams midway through the season, no matter who they have on the roster in the offseason, when they're looking at cornerback and wide receiver, when you need not just two, but sometimes three really quality players there who are healthy all season long, it just seems like you can never have enough in that position. So that's probably where I would go at the end of the first round.
Where is the overlap, and how do you handle when you say, would it be better for our team to have an above-average second wide receiver or third wide receiver rather than an elite guard or punter or long snapper? What you name the other
punter,
right?
Oh my God!
There's. Is it better to have an above-average player at a money position rather than an elite player at a non-money position? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I mean, the research again that I'm building, it's all based upon the theory, and I know that some teams really work around the salary cap very well. But generally, that's just kicking the can or things like that. I mean, the theory is it's a hard cap league. You have a certain amount that you can spend. You over a number of years, if you average out how much cash teams are spending, it's going to be roughly equal. No one's going to get really high above or below over a long period of time. So it's really just looking at how much do these players cost on the second contract. So that's how you're going to figure it out. You're going to say for an average, above average, good tier one type of player, how much is that going to cost you on a second contract versus an elite player at another position on a second contract? And that's how you're going to figure out the value. It's a salary cap league, and mostly for these draft picks, the real value you're getting there is that their salaries are depressed, whether you look at it on the average value that you're going to get, and especially for an elite player that you're going to get, that they have low salary. So you try to maximize the amount that you're getting there versus what you would have to pay if they weren't on that rookie contract.
I was fascinated by the tight end curve on your surplus value by position chart because the slide is so gradual in comparison to a lot of the other positions. It makes me wonder, Kevin, this year, with what is expected to be a very strong tight end class, if waiting could lead to a genius-like decision.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a case to be made that tight end is one of the more difficult positions to evaluate coming out of college. I mean, some of it is just we haven't had a lot of first-round picks. But if you look at the first-round picks that we've had come out in the NFL draft, whether it's someone who's been a moderate success like TJ Hawkinson recently was one of the high picks, Eric Ebron didn't necessarily do that well. We had a year where we had OJ Howard and Evan Ingram and David Njoku all come out at the same time. We just haven't seen a lot of success in the first round, and that's what those numbers are based on. Whereas the biggest successes we've had, Travis Kelce, I believe, was a third-round pick. George Kittle was a fifth-round pick. You see other guys like Dallas Goedert, who I think was a second-round pick who've done pretty well. So you've just been able to find more value in that area. The one thing I'll say about tight end, though, is I think looking at it, calculating on this basis where you're looking at how much they're getting paid, I do think it undervalues some of those elite tight ends because they just don't make nearly as much money as wide receivers.
They make half almost.
Yeah, I mean, partially it's a franchise tag issue. If you look at the franchise tag, it's calculated based upon the top 5 tight ends in the NFL, and there just aren't 5 tight ends as good as Travis Kelce, 5 tight ends as good as George Kittle. So those amounts are very low, and teams can use that for leverage to keep those salaries down. Players like Gronkowski or Kelce or Kittle, the teams are getting massive value as far as how good those players are later on. So I'm a little ambivalent when it comes to tight ends. I don't think you should be too early, but if you hit on one of them, you're going to get a lot of value even on that second contract because their contract amounts are so low.
Right. Last one before we let you go, Kevin. How much do you feel these premium position assessments and the surplus value and those things have infiltrated the traditional model of scouting prospects that GMs understandably cling to. I mean, they spend 10 months a year, measuring height, weight, speed, character, background, family, fire in the belly, all these things. But how much has this, do you feel, infiltrated the league and their decision-making on draft night?
I think it has. I mean, I think it has a bit, quite a bit. I think the NFL, and this is what I would say generally when you're looking at how the NFL has operated, front offices have been operating over the last few years, how coaches have been operating over the last few years. I think they're 1 or 2 steps closer to maybe what I would be advocating than what we see from media. So we have a lot of people when we see draft grades and other things in the media who are, picking Bijan Robinson to maybe be a top 10 pick. And that can still happen. You only need one team to decide to do that. But I think generally when we've seen, especially with what they're willing to pay players, not only in the draft, but what they're willing to pay them afterwards, that NFL teams are much more closely aligned now with what the positional values type of allocations that we're talking about than you're seeing in the media. So I would maybe discount a little bit of the media talk on this and realize that NFL teams are moving further in that direction.
Yeah. Kevin, just a real quick opportunity. Let us know where people can find your stuff, because I know you're trying to get this thing up off the ground.
Yeah. So I have a Substack. It's unexpectedpoints.substack.com. I come out with a few articles a week, a lot of numbers-based analysis, also some topical stuff that I come out with there. And then I also host a podcast for an interview once a week. And then sometimes I throw in some extra interviews depending upon how busy the season is in the NFL. So that can all be found on Substack, unexpectedpoints.substack.com.
Kevin Cole, thanks so much. Appreciate your time. Good luck with it, and we'll be watching it. Believe me, we'll read it. Thanks.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, good conversation there with Kevin Cole. We pivot to the numbers game, and we examine the McDermott Beane regime and their movement in the draft. Steve, are you ready for trade up or trade down?
Let's go.
All right, here we go. Question number 1. In the Beane-McDermott era, 2017 to 2022 for drafts, have the Bills traded up or traded down more in round 1?
I'll say traded down more.
That would be incorrect. They have traded up more in round 1. The only time they traded down, Steve, was in 2017 when they traded out of pick 10 down to 27 and took Tre'Davious White.
Yeah.
Every other instance, they have traded up.
How many times? Like 4 times?
Let me see here. I've got them in 2018. They traded up twice to get Josh. And then they traded up again to get Tremaine.
Okay. That's pretty good.
They did not do any trading up in round 1 in 2019.
See, that's the thing. We talk about all these trades. When you get it right, nobody complains.
Yeah. 2020, they did not have a first-round pick from the Diggs trade. 2021, no trading up. And then last year, they traded up 2 spots to get Kyer Elam. Question number 2. The Beane-McDermott era. Have the Bills traded up or traded down more in round 2?
I think they traded down more.
It's a tie. 2
right.
up and 2 down. So you couldn't be wrong no matter what. 2017.
Wasn't right either.
2017, they traded up for Deion Dawkins and up for Zay Jones. 2018, they didn't have a second-round pick. 2019, they traded up in round 2, Cody Ford.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't do anything in 2020 or 2021. And then last year, they traded down twice before taking James Cook in round 2.
Yeah.
Question 3. In what round have the Bills made the most picks from 2017 to 2022? They made the most picks in this round from over the span of 2017 to 2022.
5th.
Ooh, you're close, Steve.
Oh, I know.
Round 5 came in second with 8 total picks.
I knew that.
Round 6 is your winner. 11 picks.
11 picks in the 6th.
In round 6.
Wow.
They had a couple of years where they had like 3 sixth-round picks.
I knew they had a bunch.
The Rashad Wild Goose draft.
Mm-hmm.
They had 3 sixth-round picks that year.
Good stuff. Oh, well.
In what round have the Bills made the fewest picks, do you think, Steve? 2017 to 2022. Round 6 had the most. What do you think has the least?
Right first.
It's actually round 4.
Oh.
In round 4, they have only made 2 draft choices.
Who were they?
Well, that's your next question.
Oh.
So funny you should ask,
Funny I
Steve,
should ask.
because
You're
I'm going
asking
to
me.
ask you, can you name
right.
the 2 players in the Beane-McDermott era who were taken in round 4?
Tommy Doyle.
No, he was a 5th round pick.
Gosh darn it.
They're starters. They are starters. One on offense, one on defense.
I'll say
You're going to kick yourself.
Taron Johnson.
Yes. Good job, Steve. Come on, you can
And
get
I
this.
will say
Come on, you
not-
know
not-
this.
Gabe Davis.
There you go. Well done, Steve. I put that in there because I had full confidence,
Full confidence.
that you could get it.
I was yeah.
We
I
will
was-
forget
yeah.
that your
I don't-
first guess was Tommy Doyle.
It was close.
You got it, though. Taron Johnson and Gabe Davis. Well done. Nice
That's
job on
good.
the numbers game there, Steve.
Very nice.
We move on to our one burning question, and we just learned what Buffalo's draft history has been in round 1 under Brandon Beane, with the exception of the 2017 draft, in which there was a trade down made by Doug Whaley before Beane replaced him the week after the draft. Steve, do we believe a trade up or a trade down by the Bills in round 1 is more likely?
I'm going to say a trade down because I think they would like to have more picks than the 6 they've got. I think they'll want to get an extra pick or 2 if they can, and I think trading down is the way to do that. So I would say trade down.
I want to say that too. Beane is aggressive, though.
Yes, he is.
His history is aggressive.
If there's a guy there that they have,
like just off the top of my
Yeah.
head, Steve, this guy has traded up for Josh Allen, Tremaine Edmonds, Kyer Elam. That's just in round 1 alone. He's traded up for Cody Ford in round 2. He's traded up for Dawson Knox in round 3. There's a lot of examples where he's gone and got somebody. And I think that there is going to be a receiver that slides close enough to where the Bills pick at 27, and I could see him moving up to like pick 25 or pick 24.
And what's that? What would
to
that
snatch
take?
the receiver.
That would take a 5 or a 6 to do that.
And it falls in line with what our good friend Kevin Cole just said. If you're going to take somebody at the end of round 1, the surplus value says take a receiver or a corner. They took a corner last year and traded up to get him. I think they might move up a spot or 2 if one of these receivers slides. And there's a lot of ambiguity on the receiver value this year.
Yes, because they're all kind of the same size. They're the same guy.
type of.
They're the same type of guy. They're 5'10" to 5'11".
The best ones, anyway.
Right, and they're under 200 pounds.
Maybe with the
significantly.
exception of Quentin Johnston.
They're all like a $185 or less.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how teams discern those players.
Of course, watch. He just stays right where he is and picks at 27, and we're both wrong. So there you go.
It wouldn't be the first time.
Our closing figure examines the conferences from which the Bills have pulled their draft picks from the most during the Beane-McDermott era. While most would probably guess that the SEC is the conference from which the Bills have pulled the most draft selections, that is not the case. The most popular conference when it comes to Bills draft picks under Beane and McDermott is the ACC, and it is by a wide margin. The SEC is second in terms of most draft picks by the Bills, with 6 players taken by Buffalo out of that conference, but the ACC has seen more than twice that number selected by the Bills. A total of 14 total draft choices have come out of the ACC in the Beane-McDermott era. So almost a third of the picks made by the Bills with Beane and McDermott at the helm have come from the Atlantic Coast Conference. You couldn't knock me over with a feather on
That's
that
a
one.
lot of- that's
I
a
would
lot
have
of
guessed
players.
SEC all day.
Yeah, and I see, I get it. I don't think it's a conscious decision. I think it's the way the chips fall.
Yes.
But you cannot really ignore how successful these players have been.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that the Bills have hit on all their draft picks and all of that stuff, but they have gotten some players that have been extremely good. And they've built a team, not through free agency as well,
Yeah.
but they've built a team that it works. And I know that people are clamoring for this the thing I always say, they're clamoring for a magic elixir for the Bills to get that will put them over the top and get them to the Super Bowl and to win a Super Bowl but the simple fact of the matter is their formula is exactly what it should be. The changes, they don't do the same thing and expect different results. They do the same thing, try and do it better, and expect the players to be the players they hope they'll be.
And there are little adaptations here and there, but the vast majority of what they do, they should just keep on keeping on.
Absolutely. Sure. And it's when you're dealing with human beings and this thing we're going between art and science and gambling that we've said, gambling on picks, it's never doing the same thing, it's doing the same thing, but not with the same results, right? You always get different results because it's a human being aspect of what you're doing. But their formula has been proven to time and time again that it is exactly where you want to be.
That is it for us. Make sure you subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use so you know when the next episode is up. And remember, when you need to know about the Bills, you need to check Bills by the Numbers. For Steve Tasker, I'm Chris Brown. We'll catch you next time, everybody.